Welcome to Couch Church, where we take the plastic off of the living room furniture. That's right, we're sitting on grandmama's couch so we can discuss the issues at the crossroads of Christ and culture. Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Couch Church, where we take the plastic off of the living room furniture. That's right, we sitting on grandmama's couch, and we having these hard-hitting conversations at the crossroads of Christ and culture. Come on, invite people to join you on today. We're continuing in this series, March Madness, Mental Health Matters. Today's discussion is around parental involvement in student mental health services. Hey, Lady Ebony, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Pastor. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How your mental health be?
It be good.
It be good.
It be right.
It be right.
It be tight.
It be tight. Hey, Minister in Training, Crystal, Minister in Training, India. How y'all doing today?
Hey, Pastor O, how are you?
I'm doing good. How y'all be?
Good.
I'm tight and right.
You tight and right, like Minute Maid rice.
We do brown rice around.
We do
Yeah,
brown rice.
Brown rice.
Uncle Ben's rice was he was brown.
We had that conversation.
He was brown, but the rice wasn't brown. Okay, I believe that alone.
Leave that alone. No more Uncle Ben conversation.
Joining us back on Couch Church for another episode is Tamisha Lawrence, parent support specialist for Advocates for Justice and Education. Hey, Tamisha, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
You looking good in your transformed shirt.
Thank you very much for my transform.
That's right. Be ye not conformed to this world,
Yes.
but be ye transformed
Transformed.
by the renewing of your mind. So listen, as you know, we ground all of our discussions in the biblical text. It's found in Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they shall not depart from it. This scripture highlights the importance of both guiding and nurturing our children to ensure that they develop into healthy and productive adults in our society. Part of this guidance includes recognizing that many of our children experience mental health challenges. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have mental illness or they have a diagnosis, but the stress that they encounter, whether in school or home in the community, can cause them to have a host of challenges. So today we want to provide some resources to parents, to grandparents, to step-parents, to foster parents, of how not only to identify some of the stressors that are impacting our students, but also the resources that they need in order to be productive in the classroom. Tamisha, I want to start off with you on today. Let's come up with a list of some of the common challenges that children face around mental health.
You know how when you go to CVS, you get one thing and they give you this long receipt list.
Yeah.
That's the first thing they came to mind.
You've been hit by the CVS
The
receipts.
long list of receipt. The challenges in general are just no outlet.
No outlet.
That's the main. If I could sum no outlet. Even if it's just if it's not just no outlet, it's like no outlet. It's an outlet that they want. Like, we select everything for our kids. We like, you're going to this school. You really need this friend, and this is who you get to play with. This is what you wear to school. This is how you're gonna get your head done. Like, we really don't give them a lot of choice.
Freedom.
In the matter. And,
freedom of expression.
And that is important now. Like, that is important. My son is autistic. And I had to remember when teaching him the fundamentals of following directions, and he wasn't talking right away, and so he's very, very honest. He's the most honest kid you have, and it is scary how honest he is sometimes. And I had to realize when trying to get him to teach him, like, mind his mouth, I had to remember he's learning how to communicate. So if he's learning how to communicate, no, I can't teach him to lie when it's convenient for me.
Right.
I had to allow him to be more expressive, because that's a part of his disability. Like, I can't say I can't fix it for him and say lie later, but only when because so he's extremely honest.
That's
so
called adulting.
Yeah, so he has been being honest since seeing when he states observations extremely honestly, where you're not supposed to say anything. Somebody has no teeth. He asked this one lady if the tooth fairy came and got her teeth.
Oh Lord!
And I had to explain that to her. I'm so sorry, but he's extremely honest. So you have to give them the right to be themselves, but then just teach them to do it within a respectful way. So
I think the world would be a better place if we were more honest.
Yes.
That's just a caveat. That's just a caveat. All of us are parents that are on this couch.
Sorry, that's one for the book. That is one. That's classic.
Like 8.
The tooth may run and take your teeth.
They expect you to know that.
So when we come up with this list, right, of challenges that they face in mental health, I think before we had mentioned in the previous episode in terms of diagnosis and misdiagnosis and the treatment of the diagnosis. And so a lot of our children are being diagnosed with ADHD. Mm-hmm. Is that a proper diagnosis or a misdiagnosis or a change in diagnosis? And what challenge does that bring? Indy, I want to ask you because you're 15 years educator. And so your work, your profession has started early looking at kids in pre-K schools. Yep. Is one of the challenges that our children are experiencing is the fact that they are being misdiagnosed at an early age.
I don't think they're being misdiagnosed. I think they're not given the proper resources to help them cope with some of the issues that are causing, I guess, environmental issues within the classroom sometimes, or even at home. It's just how we helping them to cope, how we helping them to be successful in the environments that they're in. And it really depends on, like I said, it's always a case by case. Are we really looking at that individual child and taking into consideration all the different environments that they are exposed to? Are we looking at who are supporting them? Because a child could be fine with you, and then with this person,
they cut a food.
They act a plump food, and we see that they will put on a show. I used to take my son to the psychiatrist, and they would be like, like, why is he here? Okay, give him some. Like, don't give him something he want, and you will see the other side. Like, y'all don't get to experience that. And it was like always this constant back and forth. I'm like, you don't see it, but there's a pattern. When he can't get something he want, it's like he flips the script, and I have to deal with these extreme behaviors. And they were like, well, what are you talking about? We don't see it. You're exaggerating. Even with some of my family members, I was like, no.
So how frustrating is it as a parent?
Very frustrating.
To engage in this system. I think as a parent, you want what's best for your child. You want them to thrive and be successful. But it's almost as if, whether it's intentional or unintentional, there are these barriers to them achieving. It's a barrier for you to engage in the process, and it becomes frustrating, I would say. You just do you find that parents just too often just turn their child over to the system, to the education system, and just let what it
is what it
The
is.
chips may fall.
Yeah, see where the chips may fall.
It's not. I don't think it's that bad though. Like what they saying, letting the chips fall. Like we trust the school system. We trust them. Like when did we ever get the idea that we weren't supposed to trust them? The only reason we don't trust them now is because when someone shows us another side, like hold on, my child is supposed to have A, B, C, D in classroom, and they're not getting it, and then the school tells you something that is completely false about what your rights are to that situation, or they don't. So let's say not the school. Sometimes they have people that they select that can tell you the bad thing, that can tell you the untruth.
Right.
They can get somebody. They say, "Oh, talk to such and such." They'll tell you, and that person they won't lose their job, like,
For
because
lying
they
to
had
you.
no business telling you anything in the first
Oh,
place.
wait a minute. Slow that. Slow that. So they will send you to a person who's not even
Or they'll
the
send that
key
person to
person
you.
or the qualified person
Yes.
to tell you what's going on,
That's
and they can
scary.
lie to you because they're not the point person anyway.
Right. Because the person who
It's like them
and
sending the janitor
what's
to
not-
tell you
I-
about your
my
child.
key thing
Right.
that I tell parents, and I told a few parents that I've learned about, is if it's not in writing, it did not happen. That is my favorite quote ever. If it's not in writing, it did not happen. I say stop having those front desk conversations, the hallway. I call them
Customer
hallway
service conversations.
I said
Ask for a manager.
stop having
Right.
them hallway conversations.
It's an email
Any
conversation.
conversations you had with them, I don't care if you finish hanging up with them, you email the next day and you say, hey, it was nice talking to you. It was a nice blue shirt you had on today. But remember when you told me that Johnny said such and such? Like, make sure you do all
Make sure you let them know. Make sure you document
Yeah,
what color they had
we
on
were
so
at
you
the
can
front
know.
We were in the front office and you told me that Johnny would be suspended for 5 days, and I see in his IEP he can't really be suspended without a meal with 10 days, and he can't be suspended that long without an MDT meeting. Can you
And what
let
is
me
an
know what
MDT meeting?
But it is to know what your rights are as
Yeah.
a parent, to know what your child's rights are, because when people know, I've noticed school systems do not want to deal with parents who know their rights.
No, you're
because
right.
the
Know
first
their
thing,
rights.
I mean, I've been waiting, and I remember when I was younger, my mom would come to the school, and I would be in the office, and they'd be like,
You was
"Here
in
comes,
trouble?
well,
You
that's
was
not
in trouble?
the point is, they knew there was a protocol. When Sylvia McMorris was coming, everybody in there knew to get their ducks in a row. She documented, she asked questions, and she taught me to do that. So here's the funny thing, if I was brought to an office, at a young age I was taught, who did I talk to? What were they complaining about? I had to know. So she taught me how to advocate for myself. That skill followed me even to adulthood. Amazing. So on a job, I was like, and they wanted to bring you into that room. She was like, don't you ever go in a room without a pen and pad. Know the reason why before you talk. Know the situation, because know that they have talked before you ever got in there. And so children
Right.
when the children are raised to know how to advocate because they've been watching a parent advocate. It's a skill set that you put in them. And schools will treat you differently.
They will treat you
They
different.
don't want to see you. They don't want to see Crystal coming up to that school. They don't want to know.
But
there's I'm telling you,
there's
when they hear
still
my name,
some barriers, right?
Of course.
And so you're dealing with, I mean, we cannot lose sight that there's still some stigmas,
Absolutely.
right? And not the stigma,
Microaggressions
but not the stigma that's attached to the student or the child, but the stigma that's attached to the parent, failure to, probably be able to articulate your concerns or your demands, because you might be illiterate or you might just be ignorant to processes. So there's this stigma. I don't want to go up there and embarrass myself.
That's a very,
I cried.
very good.
I cried the first time not being able to figure out what was wrong with Amani. And, I started off believing the teacher first, right?
Naturally.
Naturally.
Why not?
But then I realized this was something that she could not help. So if she can't help it and you having issues with her, then what's our next step? And it clicked on me. My child might need more services than I thought, and they don't know how to go about that approach. So I don't know what the teacher system is when you find a child that's not behaving correctly. They can't follow instructions, they can't follow through, and they lose focus, because those were the things that they said Amani was having and struggling with. And in fact, it was she didn't know the work. She had transferred from another school, and all those students were more advanced than her. So when she didn't know how to do it, she'll shut down. She'll lose focus. She'll start behaving differently. And then once we realized what it was, Then she began to get better, but it was difficult. I cried because I was like, okay, something is wrong and I missed it.
But I think we should also control the narrative.
Yes, absolutely.
Snap that something is wrong with my child.
Right.
Right.
I don't know why. I cringe
It's-
when we say that.
right,
Like, wrong
it's-
because it's not.
Well, I
Right.
didn't know.
I know.
Right, I know. I'm
anything
just saying,
else.
but
At
but
that
but
time,
we
I did.
teach. You know, we have to educate
So
our
the child
parents,
internalizes that.
right? Because that's why most
true.
parents dread the phone call from the school.
Right.
Calling me because something wrong. Calling me because you did something bad, right? And we have to take control of the narrative to say, no, there's nothing wrong with my child.
It's the
There's something more that my child needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, like, and to not be an educator, like to know firsthand, like, that is a good observation. Like, yes, but that's why it's their job to kind of communicate it to us. And so since they're not, we have to now be more aware. And we probably should have been aware. And in our households, we learned that we control our kids. Like, we tell those kids when they walk out the door, you represent me.
There you go.
So go out this door and you make me
There you
look
go.
good, because when homeschool was horrible, because I was like, if I get one call while I'm sitting in this house with y'all, it's going to be a problem. And so my kids were like, under more pressure because they want to please
They didn't
me.
want to deal with you. They
Yeah.
were
But
like,
they
I'd rather
didn't want
deal
to, they were like,
I'm
well,
not
do
dealing
what you
with
gotta
mommy.
do.
Right.
You know, the scriptures say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Maybe the fear of parents.
The fear of all of all of the above. I'm the example.
That's right. That's
You know, we
right.
had that issue with, with our baby girl, and it was math.
Right.
And she was asking me, and y'all know,
Don't bring math in this house,
This new
y'all.
math thing, I need you to get that in the classroom. But the issue was the way they were learning now that they were back in school. It was almost like, from her standpoint, she was saying, here's the problem. You can have some online tools to figure it out. And I would say, well, go to your teacher and ask her to explain. But I can't because so and so and so. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. And I had to say, now I'm going to go to your teacher because I'm not happy with this, what you're saying, but I need you to tell me exactly what she said because I'm going to act a fool if this is what. So get your facts right first so I can advocate for you. But there was an communication issue with how she was being taught.
Yeah.
And so we had to send you fired off. This one, passer, fired off. So emails,
I'm just saying.
situations were changed, pictures was rearranged. Somebody might have shed a tear, but it was any kind.
Yes.
But what happened was our baby girl said, you know what? They are advocating for me. So if there's a problem, I'm going to come because you don't want passers firing off emails because there was an issue in the learning process. And turns out it was a student teacher who was frustrated and didn't know how to deal with all of these situations and emotions during the pandemic. And she was spiraling, so the kids were spiraling. Until this one showed up. It rearranged the whole class.
And here's the other thing. That even as a parent, if you want supportive services, it comes at a cost. You know, outside of the school system. The school system is supposed to provide it. They don't provide it. So then you saying, well, I'm going to go someplace else and get the service. Then another barrier becomes the cost of the service. Because let me tell you, tutoring ain't cheap.
It's not.
It's almost another car note.
It is.
You know, and everybody got to do what they got to do in order to make money. I'm gonna have to go to YouTube because $50 a session becomes costly, particularly in this inflationary period. I thought I was getting robbed. I was like, I thought tutoring was $25 an hour. It's done gone up to $50 an hour. So again, parent who doesn't have the resources now have this additional barrier, although they want to help. Let me tell y'all this story, right? O'Shea was in elementary school, and back then, recess was a state requirement, mandatory. They've changed it now, with recess as an option. But O'Shea's teacher kept taking recess away. And O'Shea would come home every day frustrated. And I said, O'Shea, what you going to do? He said, I don't know what to do. I said, well, you got to advocate for your rights. Well, let me do what you do. I said, well, I'm a community organizer. I protest. He said, well, tell me how to protest. I said, well, you get you a piece of sign.
Make your sign.
Write on your sign what your demand is, what you want. And if the teacher doesn't give you recess, you go march outside of the principal's office.
This is early BLM.
He made a sign. He put it in his bag. I shot an email off to the principal. I said, tomorrow you're going to have someone protesting in front of your office because their teacher keeps taking their recess. O'Shea came home that day. How your protest go? Well, I ain't had a protest. I had recess today. But it was because as a parent, I knew that recess was a requirement for elementary schools in the state of Maryland. The teacher didn't think that I'd do it, or didn't think that the student was going to come home and tell the parent, and didn't think that anybody was going to do anything about it. So O'Shea becomes informed. I now send, quote unquote, a demand letter to the principal. Remedy this. If you don't, this is what's going to happen. Right? And then everybody, the student who's the most important person in the factor is receiving. And here's the thing. People think that the recess is something that students don't need.
No, they need a break.
We had to do it for...
That was another email.
We had to send another email for Chloe, right?
Yeah.
For our youngest, because the teacher kept on taking recess.
From the kids.
And it wasn't because all of them was bad, it's because some of them was
A few
bad.
were holding up everybody's...
Right? And I said, well, she said, well, that's the way I manage my classroom. And I say, let me give you some other strategies for classroom management. Because recess is an outlet. And if you take away their recess, guess what? They're going to be more disruptive in the classroom. And she didn't respond and say, thank you.
But they had recess.
But they had resources. And so I think what we need to provide parents is a list of support.
Exactly.
What they can and cannot do. And I think what we're talking about initially is how parents just need to stay informed.
That sounds like a green book.
A green book.
Yeah.
Right. That might be something you can put together, Miss Lawrence. Put together.
As I say in my agency, we have trainings regularly.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a one school that has some concerns going on with multiple students where the students aren't being provided speech services, and those services that are not being provided are they're supposed to be provided. So the school kind of came to them with a remedy, like, hey, we're gonna give you this as an option here, but you have to sign for it first before we really provide the option. And that's not how Comp Ed goes. Comp Ed, once it's agreed upon, you can select who you choose to be your provider as long as they are a credentialed provider. And the credentialed provider is able to accept the amount that the school is willing to pay for Comp Ed. So, like, that is the way it's supposed to go. And so...
And parents whose children are in private school also have rights.
Not
from
the way that,
from the states.
Well,
So
IDEA
is yes.
But they just told me.
what's the?
You know about your acronym. You know about your acronym.
Like we got people coming from all over. They like, who do what?
IDEA. It's
so just
Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act.
Individuals with
I'm so
Disability
sorry, like my mind
Educational Act.
Okay, y'all got
So
that.
IDEA. That is everything under disability law is
Pastor,
protected.
you had to tell me that because I was getting private education and Monty needed some assistance. And I knew she needed additional assistance. And I was like, well, do you have support? Do you have tutoring? Do you have something that somebody could work on? It's like, oh, we don't provide
The
that.
school was like, no.
There's
But
a limit.
you can go to the state education. You know, the office of, what was it, in
the office of the
DC
state
is
superintendent isn't affiliated with the private sector, so that's. Yeah,
but what I'm saying
they can
is,
provide you.
they can provide you with the linkage to the school system,
title.
because there are services. Even if your child is in private education, there's still some services that the
They can
state
implement.
has to
I'm not
implement.
ready.
Okay, so
even if-
slow down. So when
Right.
people who
Right.
are watching, what
That's
they need
important.
to do if for their particular state, they need to go to their
stay
state.
informed.
How? They're saying, how do I say their state education
Go to your
website
state
or their
education
State
agency.
education.
state education website,
Right.
and then they can find information there dealing with education.
Right. You
about
start with
what
your
rights-
state education
Contact your
website.
local education agency.
Right. Then go
So-
to your local education. You go ahead. That's your job.
Contact
Yeah.
your local education agency, and that is not necessarily restrictive to the state, because you know how we have Maryland, but then we have multiple counties.
Right.
So it wouldn't be with
Okay.
state. So
Right.
it'd be your local education agency. If you're Prince George's County, for example, you would go to that educational agency or
Okay.
the office of the state superintendent in Washington D.C. to kind of ask them, like, what is it? Or you can go on their website and first look that way, but your goal would be to contact your agency so they can tell you where to get your resource from.
Because what we're talking about really is a student who's now on an IEP, or what's the other
504.
504.
504 plan.
Y'all gonna have to look this up.
No, but this is
know
good
you're looking-
because people are writing things
but
down.
what happens is, because it's not for private school students, it's not the school who does the testing, right? It's the school system that you go to get the testing, and then based upon that. Here's the other thing that parents need to understand, that those the 504 and the IEP are so critical, not just for elementary, middle school, and high school, but they also can follow you into college.
That's not true.
That's not true no
Like,
more.
Some of the
not
accommodations can
cold.
follow you to college.
Some
but
of
not
okay.
not the requirement of implementation. So like, and in college, if you are a student who needs, on your IP, you have, in high school, you have speech services. So you have a speech pull out, you're required to have a certain amount of hours on your IP. That does not follow you to college.
But if you need more
But
time,
You do.
testing.
Yeah.
If you need accommodations,
Accommodations.
the accommodations can follow you, within reason of the school, the institution. So that's the same way it is with some private schools, like elementary and middle school. The accommodations can follow you, and yes, you can get some additional services. Like you can still possibly have an OT coming to see you at your school, or in my situation when my daughter was going to private school, what I did was I reached out to my Medicaid and asked my doctor if my doctor could write a referral to see an OT, and the OT would come and see my daughter in school. And that helped. Like your doctor's office could
OT, occupational therapist.
occupational therapist.
Okay.
Sorry,
I got that. I got that,
I'm
Mom.
gonna
I got that, Mom.
I'm gonna sit on the other side of this couch. I'm gonna pull my phone out right
So
now.
what's gonna happen the next
Okay, I'm
if
taking
the next
notes.
time we talk, I'm gonna stop using these words because I have to remember that I have to say that I'm so sorry. I was not ready mentally.
No, it's okay, but now people know and they can do their own search because we're talking about how to advocate for your child, right? I'm curious to know, and I would advise those who are maybe listening, look for organizations, independent organizations in your community who, and don't be ashamed to ask for help with parenting, right? Because we all need, I'm new to the game. So I'm like, who, what, OT, what? So, but don't be afraid to just do a Google search, sign up, join an organization, because there's a lot. I'm curious to know, with the work that you've been doing and the advocating that you've been doing, what is maybe like one of the biggest examples that you can give that you've been able to do or work with parents and advocating in the school system that just made you really proud?
The first thing that I say is, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. When you have a question, ask right away. Write it down. What parents don't know is the moment you start having questions about your child, whether or not they may have a disability, write it in an email. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. such and such, I think that Adam or Sarah may have a disability, and I think that it is worth having them evaluate for special education services. Once you do that, they have to respond.
What's your biggest win? What has been your biggest win?
Yeah.
As a parent, I had my own biggest win.
Okay.
So my son was being bullied on the school bus, and he was, remember I said he's really honest. So he was on the school bus. He's telling these people like, this boy has this knife. He is threatening me. He is threatening to kill me. He is going to slit my throat. He is screaming. And the bus aide and the bus attendant did not pay him any attention. They ignored him the entire ride. So he got home to my other son, who was younger than him, and he told him. So by the time I got home, everybody was calm, but my son was like, Mom, you need to talk to him. And I was like, okay. So I talked to him, and I was still thinking to myself, like, this student, you know him. He's your friend. You sure? So I called the child's mom. The child's mom had a new number at the time, so I couldn't reach her. So the next day, I called, I called the school. Next day, no one answered. I talked to the bus attendant. They said that they asked him, but when they looked back at the student didn't have anything. So my question first is, why, if he's beside my son and my son is saying he has a knife, why didn't you move them or split them up? He said, she said, I kept trying to tell him that he's just trying to get a reaction out of your child. And so it wasn't that. So the next day we went to school. I called the police. The police got to the school. They said that because they were on the bus, it's possible that they were in D.C. at the time, because the school was in Maryland and they were being transported, that I had to call D.C. police. Long story short, these students on the way to school have to get transported by bus, but they have to get searched. They have a metal detector when you walk in the door. Now, my son didn't get searched. He had no behaviors, and that was one of the requests that I made as a parent. Like, I don't want my son being searched. If he does, he's not going through this metal detector. If you need to ask him to see his book bag when he get in, take him around back, let him see. But do not have him go through this metal detector. I don't want that for him. And so they agreed on it. Cool. But they checked, and we went to school. They basically denied everything. They said the student gets checked 3 times a day, but he admitted to having the knife.
Oh.
Wow.
He admitted to having a knife. I got home. I called 911 from my house because I was in D.C. That my son is so descriptive. He gave a description of the knife. He described it as this, because he's into anime. He described it as this anime knife with brass knuckles on it and all these ridges and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I went and called the police. The police saw the description. They went to the boy's house, picked the knife up from his house. The knife was huge. It was like a big butcher knife with brass knuckles on it. And he had been holding it to my son on the school bus. So I'm now fighting the school for private transportation because my son can no longer ride the bus. He does not want to see the color yellow. He does not want to see other students. He thinks everyone wants to kill him. So we need his own private car to get to school. They said, no, we can't do that. We're going to move him on a different bus. We took the student. Okay, well, listen, the people that were supposed to protect him on the bus weren't able to protect him. So now he thinks that everybody wants to kill him. He thinks that everybody wants him dead. He might as well die too. So since I'm not going to allow you to put that on my son, I went to the state superintendent office. I went to the Board of Education. I talked to different lawyers. I went to the news station and everyone else. And I ended up meeting the second chair to the CEO of OSSI, Office of the State Superintendent. And he was pretty much saying no too. Everybody was saying no. And then we had this meeting. I had him in therapy. The therapist was like, oh, he has suicidal ideation. Wow. He needs to talk to someone. We got into a group. At the end of the day, I was the first parent in 8 years to be awarded private transportation for their child in D.C.
Can we get a super ball in my hand?
And I was like,
Crazy. You had to go through all that
shout I had after that phone call. Like, I hadn't shouted in my life. I won't say I never shouted.
Listen,
the shouting in the crowd.
That is what happens when parents stay informed.
Yes.
They seek out resources and they advocate for their child's needs. And we need more parents like Tamisha who does those types of things. I know you talk about your organization and the list of resources that you have. Listen, we want to connect long term.
Okay.
And see how we can put some of those resources and connect them to our website so that when people go to our website, we can have a whole section set up for parental engagement and involvement.
Even if they call me and they reach out to me through work, if they don't live in, let's say they live in the surrounding area, Maryland, DC, Virginia, at the very least we can refer them.
You refer them.
That's good.
I can't say for the other 50 states, but I can say that We have that local area. We can provide different counties with their resources for their areas, as far as special education resources and support services and educational services. But we also have, like, you have your local bar association in your area also, who can provide you with special education advocacy agencies in whatever state you live in.
So the resources are out there. It's up to us as parents to connect in order so we can be our best supporters of our children while they are in the education system. I want to say thank you to Misha for joining us on the couch today. And of course, to the team, Lady Ebony, Minister in Training, Crystal, Minister in Training, India. Thank you all for joining us today. This has been a very enriching series for March Madness. Mental health matters. And so whether you are a student or a senior, or just a average, ordinary person, know that your mental health is important. And so you have to tap into the resources that are available in and outside of your community so you can continue to be successful contributor to this world. We want to say thank you for joining us on today. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Couch Church DMV. Until next time, may God bless you, may the Lord keep you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Peace.